Before the dust settles and the truth reveals itself, remember this: one choice made in silence can change two lives forever. A single payment, a single cut of a blade, and a road no one planned to walk together. This is not a story about buying a life, but about refusing to leave one behind. Late afternoon pressed down on the trading post with a weary weight, the kind that followed endless hours of haggling, loading wagons, and surviving the sharp edges of frontier existence. The sun hovered low over the crooked rooftops, throwing long, narrow shadows across the open yard where horses shifted impatiently in their harnesses and men muttered complaints over cracked crates and worn supplies. Dust-coated boots and coats alike, rising in dry clouds with every passing step. The dull clang of metal against wood, raised voices arguing over grain and tools, and the uneven groan of a wagon axle blended into a restless, grinding chorus. Nothing about the place felt welcoming, but it stood as the nearest supply stop for miles in every direction, a necessary evil for anyone living beyond the settled edges. Austin Morrow guided his bay horse through the cluttered yard, one hand loose on the reins, the other steady near the saddle horn. He had been riding since first light after inspecting the waterline that ran through his ranch. Land set deep in a stretch of country most folks avoided for its distance and isolation. Austin favored it that way. Years spent riding with cattle outfits had taught him to distrust loud men and careless tempers, and a brutal dispute in his last crew had driven him to leave that life behind without looking back. Now 39, he lived alone on a modest spread he had rebuilt board by board, nail by nail, with only his horse and the quiet rhythms of ranch work to mark his days. He came to the trading post only when supplies ran low. Today he needed nails, flour, a fresh cinch strap, and nothing else. As he swung down from the saddle, boots hitting the dirt with practiced ease, his attention snagged on a shape tucked into the far corner of the yard. At first glance, he thought it was a bundle of goods left unattended. Then a gust of wind swept the dust aside and he saw her. A woman sat on the ground with her wrists loosely bound in front of her. Her posture was rigid, her back straight despite the fatigue that clung to her like another layer of dust. Her eyes tracked every movement around her with the sharp awareness of someone who had learned to recognize danger before it announced itself. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, her bronze skin still warm in tone beneath grime and travel wear. Long black hair spilled over one shoulder, uneven and tangled as if yanked during a struggle. The deerskin dress she wore bore the marks of hard miles, frayed hems, faded beadwork, seams pulled tight with rough, hurried stitches. Her breathing was controlled, deliberate, the measured rhythm of someone determined not to show fear. Men passed her without a second look. Some wore crooked smirks, others deliberately turned their eyes away. Nearby traders barked out prices with thinly veiled frustration, their voices cracking as they tried to draw interest, but no one lingered. In this territory, she was considered trouble, too proud, too calm, too likely to resist. The trader's irritation leaked into every word. Austin stood still for a long moment, studying the scene. He had no intention of involving himself in complications. He had fences to mend, land to tend, and enough memories haunting his quiet nights. Yet something about the woman held him there. The way she sat upright despite exhaustion, the way her gaze never flinched, anchored his attention. The trader noticed and straightened, wiping his hands on his vest. "You looking?" he asked, hope and fatigue mixed together. Austin didn't reply. He moved closer, boots pressing evenly into the dirt, his pace unhurried. The woman didn't recoil. She lifted her chin and met his eyes directly. Her stare was sharp, guarded, and beneath it lay strain and resignation, shaped by repeated betrayals. When he stopped in front of her, she spoke first, voice low and steady. "Don't waste your money on me." There was no anger, no plea, just a fact offered plainly, a warning earned through experience. She wasn't bargaining. She was telling the truth. Austin's eyes dropped to the rope around her wrists. It wasn't tight, but it defined her situation clearly enough. He had seen captivity take many forms over the years, some sanctioned, some hidden, some openly cruel. This one sat in a grey space between, and the weight of it pressed against his chest. He reached to the pouch at his belt. The trader perked up, ready to haggle, but Austin didn't negotiate. He counted out the coins with the same calm he used feeding his horse each morning. The trader grabbed them quickly, relief flashing across his face. Austin crouched beside the woman, knees sinking into the dirt, and pulled a small knife from his boot. Sunlight caught the blade as he lifted it toward the rope. Her shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. She didn't pull away. She didn't look down. She watched his hands, waiting for them to tell her what kind of man he was. He sliced through the rope in one clean motion. It fell away into the dust. She didn't rub her wrists. She didn't offer thanks. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by cautious expectation. Too many men had spoken kindly only to betray her later. Austin sheathed the knife and stood. He didn't touch her. He didn't explain himself. He simply pointed toward his horse. The gesture open enough to refuse, simple enough to accept without surrendering dignity. She hesitated, pulse tight in her throat, but she rose. Her legs were stiff from sitting, each step toward the horse weighed with questions. Why him? Why now? What would he demand? Austin remained where he was, letting her decide. When she reached the horse, she stopped hands, still waiting. Austin swung into the saddle and nudged the horse forward at a slow pace she could follow. He didn't order her to walk behind him. He didn't look back. He moved as though her choice mattered. After a moment she followed. Her steps were careful, breath tight with strain, but she stayed close. She didn't know his name or his intentions. She knew only that he had cut the rope without touching her skin. That alone set him apart. The trading post shrank behind them, swallowed by distance. Evening cooled the air, the sky deepening as they crossed open land. Austin kept his eyes on the trail, the weight of his decision settling in quietly. He hadn't planned to bring another soul into his isolated life, especially one carrying unseen wounds. But he couldn't leave her there. The woman, Nia though he did not yet know her name, walked behind him, fear and suspicion tangled with a faint, unsettling sense of relief. They traveled in silence, no rope between them, only the shared truth that he had chosen to take her away. The path stretched onward, uneven ground, broken by dry grass and scattered stones, glinting in the fading light. Austin held his pace steady, reins loose, listening to her footsteps behind him. She kept up, though not easily. The wind carried the scent of dust and distant juniper. Familiar land usually calmed him, but tonight it felt altered. He had never brought anyone home. She scanned the ground ahead, staying far enough back not to crowd the horse. Her legs ached, wrists burned, but she refused to slow. Weakness invited cruelty. She stood tall, forcing her body to obey. When the trail narrowed between two ridges, Austin spoke at last, voice low and even. "We'll stop soon. Water ahead?" He didn't look back. She answered quietly. "All right," her voice rough from disuse. At the spring, he dismounted, loosened the cinch, let the horse drink. She waited, then knelt and drank slowly. Austin checked the horse, scanned the horizon. He set a tin cup near her without comment. After resting, they moved again. Cottonwoods marked his land, and beyond them stood the cabin. Small, weathered, alone. She paused, studying it. It looked orderly, lived in by one person. Austin didn't question her hesitation. He led the horse to the corral, unsaddled, then pointed toward the cabin. She stepped forward, questions racing. He watched, knowing this moment mattered. The door opened to lamplight and a room shaped by solitude. She stood near the entrance. He closed the door without locking it, set his hat aside, poured water, placed it on the table. She accepted after a pause. He tended the stove, warmth spreading. "You can sit if you want," he said, not directing her. She sat stiffly. He retrieved a blanket, placed it by the bed. "Use it if you need." She lay down, clothed, alert. He dimmed the lantern and stayed awake, watching the night. After a while he spoke softly, stating a fact about the land, not a promise. The night settled around them, and neither slept easily, both aware that something irreversible had begun. The fire settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind that filled a room without demanding attention. Austin remained in the chair near the window, listening to the night breathe around the cabin. The land spoke in small sounds now, the soft shift of the horse in the corral, wind brushing the cottonwood leaves, an owl calling somewhere beyond the ridge. Nothing came closer, nothing threatened. Time moved slowly, carefully, as if aware it was crossing unfamiliar ground. Nia lay on the bed with her eyes half closed. Her body still tense, but the sharp edge of fear had dulled. Exhaustion pressed down harder than suspicion. She had learned long ago that sleep was a risk. But tonight her body claimed what it needed. Her breathing evened out, shallow at first, then deeper. Austin noticed the change and didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, guarding the silence rather than breaking it. Sometime before dawn, the cold crept in. Without waking her, Austin rose and laid the blanket more fully over her shoulders, careful not to let his hand touch skin. The smallest distance mattered. He returned to his chair and watched the grey edge of morning gather at the window. When light finally spilled across the floor, Nia stirred. She sat up slowly, disoriented for a moment, then alert again. Austin was already standing by the stove, heating water. He nodded once, acknowledging her wakefulness without crowding it. "You're free to go whenever you want," he said, voice steady as if stating the weather. "There's food. A trail east leads to the river settlements. West takes you into higher ground." He set a small pouch of supplies on the table. Bread, dried meat, a canteen. No conditions, no expectations. Nia studied him for a long moment. She had prepared herself for every outcome except this one. Freedom offered plainly felt heavier than chains. "Why?" she asked finally. Austin considered the question, then answered simply, "Because leaving you there was wrong." The honesty of it settled between them. She nodded once, accepting the answer for what it was. She ate slowly, then stood. At the door she paused. "My name is Nia," she said. "Austin," he replied. She stepped outside into the morning light. The land opened wide in front of her, unfamiliar but unclaimed. After a few steps, she stopped and looked back. "I'll work," she said. "For a time. Until I decide." Austin nodded again, the smallest curve of relief touching his expression. "That's your choice." And so it began, not as a rescue, not as a bargain, but as two lives moving forward side by side, bound only by respect and the quiet understanding that freedom, once given without demand, could become something stronger than ownership.